Hi Joshua, and hello world. How do we determine what even constitutes the common good? The rugged individualist claims that the common good is not even something to be sought. The communist claims that the common good is to be determined by the distribution of property, or at least of the distribution of the means of production. The technocrat claims that what really ought to be sought is simply the progress of technology per se. I would propose the three principles of Catholic social teaching: subsidiarity, solidarity, and human dignity. In the last video, I did a deep dive into Pope Francis's 2013 environmental encyclical Laudato Si, and I did not determine that there were any objective reasons yet discovered for preventing the existence of AI. A technology can be determined to be bad in one of two ways: objectively or contingently. An objectively evil technology, as in a technology that can basically only be used for evil ends, should not exist at all. An example of this could be, say, gas chambers. An example of a contingently good technology, a technology that can be used for good, is, for example, nukes. If you use nuclear bombs to kill people, objectively wrong to use nukes that way. If you use nukes to blow up asteroids, fair enough. Most technologies exist in this gray area where they can be used for contingent goods or evils. Nukes and shovels would be good examples. The three principles of Catholic social teaching offer us a helpful way of determining whether something ought to be pursued or not. The basis is human dignity. That every human being is made in the image and likeness of God and therefore bears an infinite dignity. The second is solidarity, which proposes a universal fraternal love between all of humanity. And the third is subsidiarity, how to justly order a society. These three can be conceived as to include other Catholic principles like the universal destination of goods, the preferential option for the poor. And before I start, I want to say first, obviously, that I'm drawing a lot on Laudato Si. First, I want to talk about subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is the principle by which functions that can be governed at a low level should stay at that low level. Every function ought to stay on as low a level as it can. If a function can be done by a family, for example, the raising of children, it ought to be left at that level. If it cannot be left at that level, for example, the provision of housing for the homeless ought to be left to a higher level, namely a community. If that can't be provided for by the community, then it ought to be provided for by a larger community, such as the city. And what can't be handled at the city level ought to be held on a regional level, etc., to national and international. Last week I critiqued nominalism, the belief that things don't really have natures, that they only have names that we subjectively give them, which is opposed to the Aristotelian Thomistic view that things really have natures, that trees as such really do exist, and they have their own tree things going on that ought not to be ignored. Things have forms. This is opposed to Francis Bacon's view that things are utterly formless, that all things are completely open to manipulation. This is, once again, opposed to the prior alternative that whenever we create things, we are merely modifying nature, that we have an openness to the possibilities opened by the nature of the thing. For example, Neo Pueblo architecture is made from the materials that surround it. It flows with the nature surrounding it. It integrates the human and the artifice into the nature of which it is made. Art Deco, for example, would be the opposite. It would be this more Baconian, formless, we can make nature into whatever we think it ought to be kind of ethic. Art Deco buildings like the Empire State Building reflect not locality and particularity and what it's made out of, but rather globalism and industry, just because it became cheap to mass produce glass, aluminum, concrete, etc. Does AI reflect the possibilities given by nature, or does it reflect a more Baconian view that nature is basically formless, that can be made into whatever we think. As it is, AI does not at all reflect the nature that it is made out of or the people that it's made for. For example, ChatGPT has basically no design. It's a black screen. And its responses try to reflect a global or even worse, objective response. It can impersonate any person in its data set, as in any person whose words are on the internet. It gives us no reminders of its particularity. A respect for the principle of subsidiarity would begin with large language models being run by sovereign communities, shaping the values and designs of that community. This is also quite fitting given that, in a certain sense, theologically, we own AI already. Private property properly comes from the development of nature. Whenever a person comes into a field and begins to shape it into a farm, for example, they're shaping it in their own image. And by this process, that nature begins to become proper to the person. It becomes their property. And in a pre-capitalistic European view of property, it's obvious that AI should be owned by the many rather than by the few. But it is not so obvious to many of us that we already do own it theologically, because we have already been shaping the internet from which AI scrapes its data in our own image. In the next short video, catch me for what AI has to do with solidarity. Peace.